once you're situated, just make sure the mic is aimed at your chin and that the little light is on, please. Go ahead, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Robert Barnard.
And spell your last name?
B-A-R-N-A-R-D.
And are you retired now?
I am.
Okay. Before you retired, what was your career?
Just before, I was a Ward County Sheriff.
Okay. So your career was in law enforcement.
That's correct.
Could you give us a rundown of your experience in law enforcement?
I have to go back a long ways. I started in the military. I went to Minot. In 1976 and 1979, I started at the Minot Police Department. I was on patrol for about 6 years, and then in narcotics as a dog handler for about 4. I spent the rest of my 31 years in criminal investigations as a detective. I was done there in November of 2010. January 1 of 2011, I started at the Ward County Sheriff's Department. The last about 2 years of the 8 years there, I was acting sheriff, and then after that I retired. So in 2019, I retired.
Okay. In June of 2007, you were with the Minot Police Department?
I was.
And just so we're all clear, what was your role at the time with the Minot Police Department?
Detective, investigator.
Okay. Just for clarity's sake, we'll be referring to you as Detective Barnard in this. I know that your last position was sheriff, but we'll call you detective. Is that all right with you?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Were you called on the 4th of June of 2007 regarding this incident?
I responded to this incident.
Okay. Tell us about that.
I recall that I was out in a car, City of Minot car. I was working as an investigator in the evening, and I heard a call come over the radio of an unattended death. Ambulance and fire had responded along with some patrolmen, and I don't remember how far away I was from the call. I think I was a little ways away, but I knew that they would need an investigator there because we sent an investigator to every unattended death call, so I started to head that way.
Okay. What happened next?
I arrived on the scene, and I remember seeing a couple of patrolmen there. Chuck LeBoy was the one that I remember talking to primarily. I think Shane Haug was there, and another patrolman who was in training, as I recall. I don't know his name. And he apprised me of the fact that ambulance and rescue had been there and left, and that in the apartment they found a young female who was deceased in a bed, and they felt that it was suspicious.
And what happened next?
He told me that there was a group of people over to, we were standing in a grass area between buildings. I'm trying to visualize this. To my left, and it was described to me that it was the victim's father, Anita Knutson, and some friends of his that he'd come from Butte with to check on his daughter, who was deceased. And I think Marty Annell was standing there, who was described to me as a maintenance man who had found some property from the apartment outside or something.
And what happened next?
I learned that, I think Chuck LeBoy told me that this deceased individual had a roommate, the defendant, and that they lived together in that apartment. And I believe from dispatch records, we found her name, or someone knew her name. I believe maybe Gordon had told the patrol officer what her name was.
Would that be Nichole Rice?
That's
or
correct.
Nicole Thomas at the time?
Nicole Thomas is how I knew her at the time.
Okay.
Yes,
Please
Nicole
continue.
Thomas. And that she worked just a few blocks away from where we were standing. And I said we need to get a hold of her and get her over here as quick as we can so that we can start the process of finding out what's going on here. I remember that the patrolman took me over to an area, an opening in the sort of an enclave in the building where you could look inside the window. And I stayed back from the window a little bit because I was thinking about footprints in the dirt or whatever might be there. I didn't want to disturb anything. And he said the deceased is there, and I remember I couldn't see her. I didn't realize what I was looking at was the victim. And I said, where, Chuck? And he said, right there. And I said, where? And then I moved to the left, and I remember then I could see her hair and could see that there was, it looked like a bundle of clothing and stuff at the end of the bed, but I could see that the victim was there.
So that's where you found, or you and other officers found the victim, Anita Knutson?
That's correct.
Okay. Now I'm just going to back up a moment. You said that it was, you wanted to get the defendant to the scene. Why is that?
Because other than her father, who appeared to be very upset, she was going to be my source of information. I was anxious to see her and talk to her and say, what's going on here? Who's been here? What's going on? I assumed that she'd have more knowledge than anybody.
Because she was the roommate?
Because she was a roommate, yes.
Okay.
And I believe by then I knew that they had been friends or were friends,
Okay.
the victim and the defendant, Nichole.
So who reached out to try to get Nichole to the scene?
Dispatch. I told dispatch to call the place. I think it was called eTelecare. It was a call center. And I said, get a hold of the supervisor. Tell him to tell her there's been an emergency at her apartment and the police need her there right away, and ask them to release her from work.
Did she come immediately?
No. A little bit of time went by, and I thought, and dispatch didn't call me back. And I thought, what's going on here? So I called dispatch. I believe this was on the radio. Said, were you able to deliver the message? And they said, yes. They said that they would give her the message. A little more time went by, and I will admit that I was anxious to talk to her, but I think 10, 15 minutes went by again. And I thought, why isn't this, I thought of her as a girl. I thought, why isn't this girl here? What's going on? So I asked dispatch for the number, and I used my cell phone, and I called the business place. I asked for a supervisor, and I said, this is Detective Barnett from the Minot Police Department. We called about releasing someone. We need her. And he, I believe it was a male, interrupted me and said, we gave her the message.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I was of the understanding that she'd been released and had left.
Approximately how far from the scene of the murder was the defendant's employment?
As the crow flies, I think about 3 blocks. As you drive, I think about 6.
So 6 blocks, that take just a minute or two to drive?
A few minutes, yeah.
Okay. Did the defendant come to the scene after the second phone call?
She did.
Okay. And what happened then?
I knew what kind of car she was going to be driving. I believe dispatch told me, I think it was a red Pontiac Grand Prix or Grand Am. And I saw her pull up, and I saw a younger girl get out, and I assumed that that was the defendant, Nichole Thomas. And I was standing there, and she must have obviously known who I was. I had a badge and a gun on. She walked over to me, and I said, are you Nichole? And she said, yes. Best of my recollection, my exact words were, I'm sorry to tell you that your roommate's deceased, and she's been killed. I used the word, she's been killed.
How did the defendant react to that?
She didn't. She was flat, just no real reaction at all. I didn't know what to expect. I thought, I've done this many times throughout my career. You get different reactions from different people, but she just was kind of flat.
Was that reaction unusual compared to the other times that you've relayed the death of someone? It
was unusual, and I remember thinking, what's going on here? Why doesn't she seem concerned about this?
Did the defendant ask any of the what I would call the newspaper reporter questions, the who, the what, the where, the why, the how?
No, she didn't ask me anything about that, and that I found that very odd as well.
Why did you find that odd?
You know, my experience, if the cops call you up and say, I need to talk to you, for instance, the first question out of somebody's mouth is, why? What do you want to talk to me about? What's this about? What's going on? And the same thing if you notify somebody. I've excuse me, walked up to doors in the middle of the night and told parents that their son was killed in a car accident, and they say, oh my God, where? Who was he with? What was he driving? Where was this? They always have questions. She had no questions about any of this.
Is that pretty much the only time in your career that was the reaction you got?
That's the only time I recall, yeah.
Okay.
A reaction like that.
What happened next?
I think I took her at some point to a crime van that was there. I mean, other investigators were arriving, Strandberg, Sunbakken, maybe Murphy, I don't recall. Somebody brought a crime van that we had, which had some seats in it so you could sit in there and interview people or talk with people. I took her into that, and I talked to her for a little bit. I think I got a short statement from her. And then I asked her to meet me at the police department so we could talk more, and she agreed to do that. And I think at the same time, I asked the patrolman to talk to the victim's father and anybody that was there and asked them if they could come down so we could start the interview process.
So you interviewed her in the police van at the scene, and then a second interview at the police department?
As I recall, yeah.
Okay. Were those interviews transcribed?
I believe they were, yes. Yeah, they were recorded.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Now, Detective, I've handed you 2 documents. Do you recognize these documents?
I do?
Are these the transcripts of the interviews that took place between you and the defendant?
Yes, they are. One's indicated it's in the crime van and the other one at the Minot Police Department.
And were those both done on the 4th of June of 2007?
They were. One at 18:11 hours and one at 22:27 hours.
Have you previously reviewed these transcripts?
I did very briefly. I wasn't provided a copy of them.
If you could take a look at those and tell us if they are true and accurate copies of those transcripts.
What are the exhibit numbers, please?
I believe it was 16 and 17, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Please keep in mind it's been 17 years, but these appear to me to be accurate, correct?
So those are true and accurate
As I
copies?
recall them, yes.
State moves to enter exhibits 16 and 17 into evidence.
Mr. Sand.
We're going to object to their admission, Your Honor. Detective Barnard's here, and the best evidence is his testimony. He said he's reviewed these and the conversations he's had, so we're going to ask that they not be allowed into evidence.
Exhibits 16 and 17 will be received over your objections.
What happened next in the investigation?
Myself and investigators put on gloves and made entry to the apartment and viewed the deceased body and the general appearance of the apartment. I recall that at some point in time, I think from the crime van, we retrieved a large white paper roll that we kept. That was placed on the floor by the bed, and we removed the body. I think myself and Strandberg actually removed the body and placed it on that paper before it was placed into a black body bag. And at that time, I could see injuries to the victim that appeared to me to be stab wounds. And then later the knife was discovered in the bedding.
Now, you said a moment ago appeared to be stab wounds. Is that consistent with other times that you've seen stabbings in your career?
Yes.
Okay. Was it clear that that was what the cause of death was to you?
Well, I'm not a medical examiner, but it was my assumption. Yes, it was a reasonable assumption that these upper body knife wounds were the cause of her death.
What happened next in the investigation?
I think I left the scene, and the rest of the investigators continued to process the scene and collect evidence, take pictures, do all that stuff. And I went to the police department and started interviewing.
And you interviewed the defendant at the police department?
That's correct.
Did you interview other individuals at the police department?
I've interviewed a lot of people at the police department. I don't know who else I did on that specific date.
Okay. What was the next thing that happened in the investigation that you were a part of?
Well, I'm trying to think of the chronological order. Of course, we all met and talked about what was going on, and I remember sharing with the other investigators the what I felt was odd reaction from Nichole, the defendant, about this event. And they talked about retrieving other evidence. I believe a curtain rod, window screen from the maintenance man. We talked about the scene and taking footprints or trying to get prints by the window. We talked about the fact that the door was locked when the father got there, who would have keys to the door. And then we made it, I believe the next day, We asked the defendant, Nichole, to come with us and go through the apartment and look for anything that was out of place, things missing, furniture knocked over, whatever would be out of place, because we assumed that she'd be familiar with the contents of the apartment. And as we talked, I said, watch her, guys, I think is what I said. Let's see what her reaction is when she gets in the apartment. I'm curious to see how she's going to react to this.
And how did she react?
She was cooperative. She went in with us and she looked around, couldn't find anything. I kept watching her to see if she was going to look in the room. The room was right there and the door was open. The bed was right there. Of course, everything had been removed from the bed, the bedding and the body and everything, of course, was gone. She never looked. I felt as though she wasn't avoiding it, but she never looked, never asked a question about it, nothing. She did lock in on the fact that I think there was like an end table or a small table there. She had some kind of electronic device, nano or something, I don't remember what it was, that was missing. And she said they took my nano or whatever it was.
Would that have been an iPod Nano?
It could have been an iPad. I don't remember.
iPod.
Okay, iPod. Okay. I assumed it was some type of device with music on it, and I probably knew the name at the time, but I don't know. And she just kind of fixated on that. She was all of a sudden she was animated. And she was animated about this listening device, and I thought, this is what excites you here? This is what you're concerned about? But she said they stole it. Other than that, she was cooperative and said that everything in the apartment appeared to be just as it was when she last saw it.
So the possibility of losing an iPod got her excited, but not the death of her roommate.
Well, that's the way it appeared to me.
Okay. Now, on the 4th of June, so we're going to go back a day, was there a video taken of the apartment?
Yes.
And were you part in that video?
Yes.
Have you reviewed that video?
No. Well, I have seen it, but not recently.
Okay. Did you just watch this video 2 nights ago?
I saw a portion of it, yes.
Okay. And was that the video that you saw 2 nights ago, the video that was taken that day?
Yes. I
And you're
didn't see it from beginning to end, but
Okay.
I saw the majority of it, yes.
And you're in that video?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Detective Bernard, I've handed you a disc. Do you recognize that disc?
Yes, I do.
Does it have your initials on it?
It does. It's Exhibit 15, and it has my initials on it.
Is that the disc that you reviewed?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and is that a true and accurate copy of the video that was taken that day?
Appears to be, to me, yes.
Okay. The state moves to introduce Exhibit 15 to end evidence.
Mr. Sand,
No objection, Your Honor.
claims Exhibit 15 is received without objection.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
You may. If at all possible, try and get that microphone as close as you can.
Yep, that was my game plan, Your Honor. As soon as I... That's about as close as I can get it. I'm just going to pause the video right there. Detective Barnard, what are we looking at right there?
You're looking at what I would describe as like a Tupperware container with some water in it in the bathroom sink.
Okay, and that was it was a two bedroom, one bathroom apartment, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this is the only bathroom?
Yes.
Okay. And whose bedroom are we looking at right now?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm just going to pause. Was this Anita's room?
That's correct.
And is that Anita that we see on the bed?
Yes.
So because this is Anita's room, can we assume the other room was the defendant's
We
bedroom?
can assume that. Yes.
Okay. Now, as we're watching this video, this is before any evidence was collected, anything was disturbed by law enforcement. Is that
That's
accurate?
correct.
Okay. So nothing had been moved at this point.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Is this portion the outside of the apartment?
It is the window, you just depicted the window of the apartment, the bedroom, Nita's bedroom.
Sorry if we kind of jumped backwards there. We were talking about the 5th at this point. I went backwards. What happened next in the investigation?
We continued to interview people and talk to a lot of different people. By this time, obviously, the media had news of this incident, so we started collecting tips and leads in the process of taking all the evidence that had been returned or been reclaimed to the state laboratory and collecting DNA evidence from people, etc.
Now, you mentioned the media. Was there a fair amount of media interested in this case?
Local media, yeah.
Is it fair to say that there's a fair amount of interest from local media anytime there's a homicide?
Yes.
Okay. When the media was reaching out regarding the death of Anita Knutson, were the full details of the case given to the media?
No, never.
Why is that?
Because you always want to hold back. You don't want to, how do I say, spoil the crowd. I don't want to, if you're someone that I want to talk to that could have information about it, I don't want you to hear about it on the media before you come talk to me. I want your personal knowledge uncorrupted, so to speak, by the media. So you always keep details back that only you would know if you were there, for instance, had you been there.
So, for example, if we were talking about a hit and run and it was a blue sedan, you might not say that it was the color of the vehicle.
Well, in the case of a hit and run, you would, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, you would keep that information back.
I acknowledge that was a terrible example
No,
for that, but
that's fine.
okay. Please continue what happened with the investigation.
We continued to do that. Nichole, the defendant, was asked to come back several times, I think, to be interviewed, contact with her. I continued to talk to more and more and more people, follow up on tips and leads. Karen Lear is Anita Knutson's aunt. She contacted me. I kept in touch with the family. We talked a lot. And as you can imagine, this was a huge deal. We talked about it every day in the office for years.
As part of the investigation, did you speak with Kevin Thomas?
I did.
And who was Kevin Thomas?
He would be Nichole Thomas's father.
And what was the purpose of talking to Kevin Thomas?
To see what he knew about the situation and to try to nail down when Nichole was at the apartment and when she wasn't.
And did Kevin Thomas provide you with a statement?
He did.
Okay. What was that statement about?
He gave it to me at the police department. As I recall, he came down, he brought his daughter because we were talking to her, the defendant, Nichole, at the same time. Somebody else talked to her, I didn't at that time. And I think I asked him about the situation in general and dates and times when he thought his daughter was at the apartment and when he thought she wasn't there.
Okay. And what was the impression that you got from Mr. Thomas?
I think, I don't know the man. I think he was trying to be as honest with me as he could, but still protective of his daughter, obviously.
Did you learn anything about his position regarding whether or not he would have known if Nichole had left the farm?
Well, it struck me that he said that she was at home.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
The question was about learning, Your Honor, and yesterday it was established pretty well that if a person learns something, that's not hearsay.
That's not the way you asked the question. That's not the way you started to answer it. So you can rephrase your question, but the objection is sustained.
Did you learn anything regarding Anita's, or not Anita, excuse me, if Mr. Thomas, and this is Kevin Thomas I'm talking about, would have known about the defendant leaving the farm?
Yes.
And that was learned from Kevin Thomas?
Yes.
Okay. Was Mr. Thomas adamant when he...
Objection, he's testifying, Your Honor.
Sustained.
That's an impression, Your Honor.
Not yours, though, Mr. Nelson. So sustained.
I'll move along. What was the next part of the investigation?
Continue to interview people. Continue to get tips and leads and follow up on them. Continue to contact the lab and talk about fingerprints and DNA evidence and hair and things of that nature.
Now, you left the Minot Police Department approximately December of 2010.
November of 2010.
November of 2010. And then January of 2011, that's when you went to the sheriff's office?
Correct.
Okay. So between June of 2007 and November of 2010, were you the primary detective on this case?
I guess so. We all worked on it, but I was the first one on the scene, so I was sort of primary.
Okay. And during that time, were you able to figure out who potential suspects might be?
Yes.
Okay. And who were some of those potential suspects?
Well, I don't know that I call them suspects. We had people of interest
people of interest. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, people of interest. Devin Hall was a person of interest. It's not unusual in a case like this, especially one that goes on, that everybody kind of comes out of the woodwork. People call, they want to help, they want to insert themselves into the case. Some people do. So we had several people like that. There was a custodian from the college that came forward and said that Anita had told him in passing that she loved him. Obviously, he needed to be investigated. People like that, things like that.
Now, all these people that were looked at, did any of them rise to the level of being not just a person of interest, but a suspect?
No.
Why is that?
It just didn't pan out. For instance, the gentleman I talked about from the university, he didn't know where she lived. He couldn't even really describe her to me. He just told me this, and then we later learned that he had a little bit of a learning disability. I interviewed his ex-wife, who said he was never violent, and she wasn't surprised that he was trying to draw some attention to himself. I talked to his boss, who said the same thing. Yeah, he's a custodian here, and he, I can see where he'd like you to pay attention to him. And then he just never rose to the level of being anyone of any greater suspicion.
Was Nichole Rice or Nichole Thomas at the time ever ruled out as a suspect?
No,
And why is that?
because she was always in the picture. We always had doubts. I was always surprised by her reaction. And then later, during statements, they were a little bit inconsistent on dates and times, where she was, when she was there, etc.
Okay. Now, we talked a moment ago about the holdbacks from the media, that we don't tell everything, and you corrected me about a hit and run potentially. Was that also done with potential suspects?
Yeah, I don't remember releasing anything about any potential suspects. The only, if you want me to describe it, there's only one incident in the case that I remember where we put something like that out.
Now, the question I'm asking or trying to ask here is, was any of that, the specific sort of details of the case, ever given to the defendant, Nichole Thomas Rice?
No,
Okay. So she would never have known the specific details of the murder?
no, not from me, not from the investigators.
Now, looking back to that video that we all saw, in the bathroom sink, you described it as a Tupperware full of water. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. What happened with that Tupperware full of water?
I believe it was, the water was collected by one of the investigators and kept for testing.
Okay. So and that would have been done when everything else was being processed, when Anita was put on the white paper and all that?
Correct.
Okay. So when Nichole was brought to the apartment, that Tupperware full of water would not have been?
It was gone.
Okay. Now, were you on scene when Anita's body was removed from the apartment?
Yes.
Okay. How was that body removed?
The ambulance responded. I mean, the ambulance was there initially, obviously, but then typically we'd call them back later after we were done with the crime scene to transport the body to the morgue. And the body was placed into a black typical body bag and put onto a gurney and taken out to an ambulance.
Now,
Sealed. The bag would have been sealed.
so zipped up, like
Zipped
we see
up.
in the movies?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, in your career in law enforcement, I would imagine you've seen these bags on multiple occasions?
Yes.
Okay. Are they see-through?
No, they're black. Heavy black plastic.
Heavy black plastic, so you can't see what's inside.
I've never seen one that you could see inside of. No.
When the body was removed, would it have been zipped up?
Oh yes, absolutely. Zipped and sealed in the room before we removed it.
So would have there been any opportunity for the defendant to see the body of Anita other than just knowing that it was in the body bag?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Sand, do you have any cross-examination,
I do,
sir?
Your Honor. Thank you. Thanks for being here, Detective. So it's true that you weren't working for the police department when these charges were brought, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm going to go over a couple of things regarding your testimony. You had referred to curtain rods and property outside the apartment. That was the curtain rods and the curtains and curtain rod that had been strewn outside the window and then thrown back in, correct?
I am of the understanding that the curtain rod and curtain were outside of the window, and when the maintenance man found that, I was present when he told me or one of the officers that he threw that back in the room.
Okay. And that's Marty.
I didn't see it outside
No,
of
no.
the room, but I was of the understanding it had been outside.
And the maintenance man was Marty Annell, correct?
That's correct.
Now, when the state was talking to you, you guys were referring to something that happened 2 nights ago. Did you guys meet 2 nights ago?
We did.
Okay, to just go over everything?
Not everything, no.
What'd you go over?
Exhibits that were to be entered.
Okay. So you had some time to kind of catch up on what was going to be presented today?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Do you recall doing press releases from the Minot Police Department in 2007 and 2008?
I recall, I don't remember what was on them, but I remember releasing information, sure.
Yeah. Isn't it true that you did a press release in August of 2007? Sent to the, well, I'll call it a press release, Mid-State Organized Crime Information Center. And your conclusion in that press release is that the murder weapon was recovered at the scene. And isn't it true that you were looking for a Native American male in his early 20s, approximately 6 feet tall?
Well, that wasn't a press release, I don't believe.
What was that?
Well, MOCIC, Mid-States Organized Crime Information Center, is a conglomeration of information packet for law enforcement agencies. So you would share the information of a crime that you had with them in hopes that they would disseminate it to agents, law enforcement agencies that might have similar information and be able to contact you and say, hey, we had the same thing happen in our town or something.
But you didn't send them something looking for a 5'5" blonde girl. You sent them something looking for a 6-foot Native American man in his early 20s.
That's correct. That's somebody we were trying to locate at that time. You're correct.
Right. Okay. And that the murder weapon was recovered at the scene.
Right.
Okay. On October 7th, did you do a news release?
I'd have to see it. I don't remember.
I'll let you take a look. Thank you, Detective.
Yep, this appears to be from me, and it is dated October 7th, 2008.
Could you take a look at the contents?
Yes, I recall that.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
In the press release, it's true that you're looking for a 200-pound male, 6'3" to 6'4".
Someone who was described to us like that, yes.
Okay. Running from the area of the homicide.
Correct.
Okay. How tall do you think Nichole is?
I don't know. 5'6"? I don't know.
Female?
Female, obviously.
Not 6'3", 6'4"?
No.
Not obviously Native American?
No.
Okay. In fact, in this news release, it's true that you had a local artist do a rendering.
Yeah, I called the university art department because we didn't have an artist available, and they sent me an art student.
Okay. Did that rendering look like Nichole Rice?
No, not at all.
Or did it look like a Native American, 6'3", 200-pound man?
It looked like a 200-pound man. I don't know if he looked Native American to me, but he looked like a 200-pound man.
I've read through a lot of evidence in this case, reports, things created by law enforcement. I've gone through all of it. My whole office has, because this case is important to us.
Is there a question here, Your Honor?
I'm just about to hit it.
Mr. Nelson, it's his cross-examination.
Isn't it true that you concluded that easy access could be made through the bedroom by cutting the screen and going in?
I wouldn't say easy access.
You wouldn't?
No.
If I showed you a report, might that help you a little bit?
I'll review it.
Thank you, sir. I'll show you right where it is. Start on the word easy there.
That is what it says.
And I'm just asking to refresh your recollection, but I appreciate it.
Sure.
And I know it's been a long time, but if you could think as hard as you could, I'd really appreciate it because it's important, sir. Now, did you also conclude, it's true you concluded, that you speculated that someone exiting through that window had caught the curtain and the curtain rod?
That was my most reasonable assumption at the time, yes.
Okay. On their way out of the window.
It would seem to me that the most reasonable conclusion an average person could reach, knowing what I knew at the time, that if they exited through the window, it was inside out.
And I'm just confused because you're telling me that Devin Hall was never a suspect in the case, but you're doing press releases, you're sending letters to or crime agencies looking for this kind of person. Isn't that true?
That's correct. Two different individuals.
Now, isn't it true that during the course of your investigation you discovered that there was a Native American male, late teens, early 20s, 200 pounds, 6'2", running in a white t-shirt and shorts?
That we discovered that person? No,
No, did you conclude, did you discover that in your investigation?
a woman came to us.
What was that woman's name?
I don't recall. She was with her child. She told us, and I have not read the report, so I'm best of my recollection. She was entering an apartment building to the north of the crime scene and saw a man, the description that you gave, about 200 pounds, could have been Native American male, running in a northerly direction. She felt that was concerning because he seemed to be running very hard. So we had the drawing done from her description. We made the decision to disseminate that to the public in hopes that we would get a tip or a lead. And a gentleman came forward and said, I think I'm that guy because I was running there at that time, and I believe she probably saw me. He, in my opinion...
I'm going to stop you there, sir. So you continued to send these out, because we're talking about a press release that I just showed you from 2008. October 7th of 2008. How long after the murder was that?
I'm sorry?
October 7th, 2008, the news release we went.
Well, from June of 2007 to
So over a year.
October 8, yeah.
And you're still sending press releases out looking for this Native American.
Yeah, I don't know when that information came to us. It seemed like it was later, but I don't recall.
Over a year and a half later?
I don't know.
Some guy came in and said, that's me?
No, I don't recall when the woman came forward and gave us the information and description
Well,
of the
we'll get
male
to
she
that.
saw
I
running.
appreciate that. Do you recall in the course of your investigation that you found out that there was dirt or possibly blood on that person's clothes?
No. She described a stain on his shirt.
I'm going to have to show you again your report here, sir. I'll have you look. I mean, it's the first paragraph, but you can start here and just kind of get. You'll know when you're there.
That's her description, yep. I can read it if you wish.
It's okay. So that's correct?
She described it as a stain on his T-shirt, possibly blood or dirt.
Thank you. You know what Devon Hall is?
Yes,
In fact, he's referenced quite a bit in your report, isn't he?
that's correct.
How did you end up interacting with Devon Hall?
John Klug from the police department called me and said, Bob, you should know the last night patrol dealt with a Native American kid on Sioux Street. He had entered an apartment and was, I think, hiding in a closet in near a girl's room or in a girl's room, and was, I think, chased by the father and maybe a neighbor, and eventually captured.
And it's true he had a knife on him, right?
He had apparently taken a knife from the kitchen, had it in his pocket, back pocket, I believe.
He had a knife on him, right?
Right. That he'd taken from the apartment.
Sure. How long after Anita's murder was this?
I don't recall.
A couple of days?
Was it a couple? Yes, I believe it was.
Okay.
Just a couple days.
Did you discuss what happened with him?
Yes.
Did you interview him?
Yes.
Now, it's true you met with the FBI on this case as well, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's true that you met with the FBI in this case, isn't it?
We talked with him, yes.
Yeah.
Well, there was an FBI agent that helped us, yes.
You, Strandberg, and Dale Meixner? And it's true that in your conversations, the conclusions that you guys met was that this was Devon Hall that did this.
No.
That's what the FBI concluded in the conversation.
It was the FBI's opinion, yes.
Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Right.
Devon Hall did it. Not a suspect, though, right?
No, they said that he was a suspect. I don't know that they said he was responsible
You
for
said
the
he
crime.
wasn't a suspect.
Right.
Do you know where Devon Hall's from?
He was from Montana. Was it, I don't know where he's from originally.
I think Fort Peck Reservation.
Yeah, I think it was Poplar.
Yeah. Now, when the state was asking you questions, you talked about a variety of suspects that you kind of put in the same category, isn't that right?
People of interest, yeah.
One was a custodian with a learning disability, as you described it, who said that Anita said she loved him, right?
He told us that.
Yeah. And you said that guy's name along with Devon Hall. You said custodian, Devon Hall, correct?
I believe I did, yeah.
Okay. Did you have as much evidence regarding this custodian as you did with Devon Hall?
No.
FBI telling you he did it?
Well, the FBI didn't.
Okay.
The FBI didn't tell us he did it. But you're correct. No, we did not have as much evidence as we did with.
Because I'm just concerned that they're getting lumped into the same category. Is that a fair concern of mine?
Sure. If I were the defense attorney, I would be concerned about
I
that.
appreciate that. I'm going to go back to one of my earlier questions. These charges weren't brought while you were at the PD's office, were they?
I did not charge the defendant, no.
But you're here today in your retirement, correct?
That's correct.
You've been brought back here.
Subpoenaed by you and the
That's
prosecutor.
true. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with all the work that you did, Detective Goodman did, I believe it's Detective Strandberg, trying to keep everybody straight. No charges were brought.
Not up until the point I left the police department, no.
No charges were brought against Nichole.
No.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Nelson, do you have any redirect?
I do, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Just going to go back over a few things. That runner from the scene, that person was identified?
Yes.
How was that person identified again?
He came in. He came to the police department, I think, with his wife and said, I've seen this. I've been thinking about it. I assume he saw it in the media. Maybe he told us that. I don't recall. And he said, I think that was me because I was running there at that time, and I meet the description.
And was there any reason to doubt him?
The general description, I should say.
Was there any reason to doubt him?
No.
Okay. And you are aware of the reenactment video with Detectives Goodman and Thompson trying to go in and out?
You were talking about the window, yes.
Yes. Have you seen that video?
I have.
When you're watching that, did it look like it was easy to get in and out?
No, it's hard to get in and out of the window.
Okay. Now, a moment ago on cross-examination, you used the phrase "at the time," and then you were kind of cut off. What did you mean when you were talking about "at the time"?
I don't remember what it was in reference to.
It was in reference to the knowledge that you had as far as suspects.
Well, I'm still not sure. But if you're talking about Devon Hall, it was...
It was about the. Let me back up. It was about the curtain rod and the curtain. You said that at the time it made sense that it would have been gone out. What did you mean by that?
Well, you only got out of a window or you left a door. There was no other way to exit the building. And if the curtain rod was truly outside, as I was told it had been, I didn't see it outside, then to me it was reasonable to assume that someone could have left through that window and dragged that curtain rod with them as they left.
Okay. Now, Mr. Sand was asking you about the fact that we met a couple nights ago. You're retired. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Where do you spend your winters?
Arizona.
Probably a little nicer in Arizona than it is when it's 30 below in Minot.
It was when I left on March 10th.
Okay. So were you in Minot over the last few months to sit down and prepare for the case?
No, we left December 16th, I think.
So that was pretty much the first time in the last few months to sit down face to face and see those things.
The only time I've sat down face to face with you guys.
Okay. Now, you mentioned on cross-examination that what the FBI had to say.
Correct.
What information did the FBI have?
They had the initial information that we had about Devon Hall, that he was in an apartment, he was chased, he was a juvenile, he was a Native American male, he was arrested. That was all. The FBI was there to try and help us any way they could after a lot of discussion, because the FBI doesn't become involved in local murder cases typically. So we sent them this packet of information, and I can't tell you as I sit here exactly what was in there. And they reached the conclusion that of the information that we sent them, Devon Hall was the most likely suspect. And I would have to say, based on the information we sent them, I would have concluded the same thing.
But sitting here today, you have a different conclusion.
Yeah, because I have additional knowledge. They didn't sit across the table from him in an interview. I don't believe they saw the video of him later. I have information they didn't have.
Okay. And with that extra information that was unavailable to the FBI at the time, you have a different conclusion.
Calls for speculation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there was testimony about a break-in that Devon Hall had done on Sioux Street.
Correct.
All right. You know where Sioux Street is and why not?
I definitely do.
Okay. We've got a map up here. Permission for the witness to come down for demonstrative, Your Honor?
Yeah, as long as you give him a mic. Yes.
Yep. We'll share this one.
Make sure you share it then. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I don't think Colette trusts you.
No. Testing.
Now, Detective Barnard, this is 2B. This is more of a blow-up of the, what section of Minot is this?
Well, this would be North Broadway. The airport's here on my right. This is Burdick Expressway. The fairgrounds would be to the east. So the northern part of Minot.
Is Sioux Street on this map?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, I've had a sticky note here where I wrote Devon Hall on it. You see that?
I do.
Can you use that to point out where Sioux Street is on this map?
Your Honor, may I go up there and take a look at what they're doing?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So that's where Sioux Street is?
That's correct.
Okay. And is that a fair ways away from where the murder took place, Anita?
Other side of town or southeast, yes.
Okay. Different quadrant of the city entirely.
Yes.
I just wrote Devon Hall on that.
Can you take a seat?
Yes. You can go back to this. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Sand, do you have any recross?
Just briefly, because we brought up interviewing Nichole on redirect. Every time you called Nichole, did she come in and talk to you?
Your Honor, I didn't bring up on redirect any interview with the defendant.
That's correct, Mr. Sand.
I beg to differ, Your Honor.
Well, my notes say that he did not bring up Nichole on the redirect. So I'm in agreement with the state for
Okay.
that.
I guess I have one other question. It's an evidentiary issue we can talk about after, Your Honor.
Then you can ask that question.
The additions of the arrows with Devon Hall's name, are those going to be part of evidence, or the additions that have been put onto the map?
I'm unsure what you're talking about, Mr. Sand.
Maybe we could talk.
You're
about
saying that the sticky has an arrow on it
it. Yes, with
with the name Devon Hall on it?
yes, yep.
My understanding is that was the sticky that Mr. Nelson gave the officer to place where Devon Hall was found
Yes, sir.
in the apartment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have a question about that?
I'm just wondering if it's part of evidence now.
Yes.
Okay. It wasn't offered and introduced, and that's the only reason I have an issue with it, Your Honor.
The state would offer that as evidence, Your Honor. It was a demonstrative.
All right, Mr. Sand, do you
Well,
object?
I object. It was an addition to this, Your Honor, and it wasn't presented properly, so I'm going to ask that it not be allowed in.
All right, I agree with you. Do you object to that offer?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Over your objection, Mr.
Okay.
Sand, the court will allow for that sticky to be part of that exhibit on 2B, which is the blow-up.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you have another question?
Nope, that's it, Your Honor.
All right. Is Officer Barnhart here by subpoena?
He is, Your Honor. He can be excused from the state subpoena.
Mr. Sand?
We do have him under subpoena, but we're in contact with him as well, Your Honor. So
All right. All right, you're excused from the state subpoena, but not the defense.
Thank you.
Thank you.